Brian Boucher is an NHL analyst for TNT. He's going to be at ice level for both today's games in the Four Nations face-off. Brian, I'm just warning you, you are in, because this is a holiday, you are on the air with us is the play-by-play voice of the Boston Bruins, Mr. Ryan Johnston. And he needs no introduction but Dan Roach, who's on TV locally. So no pressure. You thought you were just doing some nickel and dime radio show. But there are two captains of Boston. You're with Boston royalty, Brian, so just be on the lookout.
I'm incredibly nervous for this hit, so good to be with you guys this morning.
Yeah, I don't know what rinky-dink towns you're doing other interviews in, but my friend, this is going to be the big one. All right, I have a simple question. Obviously, this is Boston. We cover the Bruins extensively. It's a team we talk about every day. But I was surprised at the amount of fighting and how quickly it happened in that USA-Canada game. I understand the third fight, even though I don't understand the matchup. But I do understand the third fight. But what, in your opinion, why did that happen? Why right away were people dropping the gloves?
Well, I mean, if you go back to the only thing I can think about is that if you go back to after the first game when the U.S. played Finland, Matthew Tkachuk was asked by a reporter about being booed in Canada, and I thought his quote was pretty interesting. And I don't have the exact quote, but he said something to the effect that I didn't like it, and that's all I'm going to say about that. And to me, I think he took it personally. Like I don't think anybody's really talking about this, but the political environment that we are in, I think, played a role in some of it. And the Canadians are not happy with United States leadership, and they have been voicing it very loudly at sporting events to American teams when they play the American anthem. And I think Tkachuk took it personally, to be quite honest with you. And I think he wanted to send a message right off the hop to get his team juiced up, and he and his brother certainly did that. And I think looking back on it, you're kind of like, well, you can see how it could take place, but at the time, it was mildly surprising, considering that there really was no reason to fight other than if you just wanted to get some anxiety out of you, which he certainly did. And I think it was I thought it was great entertainment, if you ask me. I mean, I thought it was the most exciting hockey game I've watched since the 1996 World Cup, and that's 29 years ago. And I watch hockey and I played hockey. And I can tell you that I don't ever remember a Stanley Cup final being as intense as that game was. It was great drama, and as an American, I was, and as a fan watching, because I wasn't working that game, I was extremely proud of the way that those guys responded in that game.
Okay, just again, I've heard the '96 World Cup referenced. You're not the first person I've heard reference in light of the game last weekend. Can you inform the listeners and myself what happened in that '96 World Cup game that was so memorable?
Well, it was a best-of-3 final, and it took place. My memory is slightly foggy. I think the first game or two might have been in Montreal to start that 3-game final, Canada-U.S., and then the last game may have been in Philadelphia. But if you go back and watch that series, I mean, there could have been a penalty called every other shift. And I'm not talking like a tripping penalty. I'm talking about trying to break somebody's arm type of penalty, like slashing. And it was the nastiest hockey you have ever seen. There were fights in that series. I think Keith Tkachuk fought Claude Lemieux in that series. And that took place in September. This is before training camps opened up. I mean, the level of intensity and hatred that was in that series. And I was just a 17, 18-year-old American player that was drafted by Philadelphia. And that win, I got to tell you, I mean, everybody talks about 1980 being an inspiration to American players. That win in '96, them beating Canada in the World Cup, inspired me as a young American to want to play for the United States at the World Juniors. And we ended up playing in the World Juniors, I think, that year in Switzerland, and I think we got a silver medal. It was the best the U.S. had ever done at that time. So, those guys, talking about Keith Tkachuk, Bill Guerin, Tony Amonte, Darian Hatcher, Brett High. These guys, they motivated a young group of Americans, and I think that's what got the United States kickstarted to get their national program going eventually, and now to what we have today. So, yeah, it was a nasty series. If you go back and watch it, do it. You'd be doing yourself a heck of a favor in watching some unreal hockey.
And Lemieux didn't turtle during the fight. You're saying he fought.
I got to be honest. He stood in there and he stood in there. He did not turtle like that fight against.
I'm from Detroit,
Detroit.
so that was that's tattooed to my brain.
But it was almost like his kids did the other night. I mean, it was like 20 seconds into the game in Montreal, he dropped the gloves with Claude Lemieux, and there was, I think, either two simultaneous fights or one right after the other. It was almost carbon copy of what started the game the other night.
Dad did a little talking to before the game.
I don't think he needs to. I think Matthew and Brady know what their job is.
Yeah, and well, they certainly showed it. One of them certainly showed it while they were playing the Bruins in the playoffs last year. Go ahead, Dan.
Brian, a lot of people watched that game. Obviously, it got everybody talking yesterday over at the availabilities. Both coaches, Cooper and Mike Sullivan, talking about it. The players saying it was the most fun they had. How does that and everything that we saw with it, the Charlie McAvoy hit, how does that unfold today and tonight, and especially Thursday if it is the U.S. and Canada again on Thursday night?
Yeah, I'm interested to see how the U.S. responds after coming off of such a high. I mean, let's be honest. The game to them this evening means absolutely nothing, and we probably won't see Matthew Tkachuk, considering he didn't play much of the third period the other night. Chris Kreider probably will draw in, but how do you respond after an emotional game like that? We'll see if the game means anything for Sweden, as you guys mentioned before we came on, that if there is a regulation win in the afternoon game, then the game essentially means nothing. So for the U.S., they can probably get their sights set on looking ahead to Thursday, but they still got to play a game and stay sharp and whatnot. But I hope it's Canada in the final, because the way that game played out in Montreal, I mean, fans deserve another go round of that. But we'll see how it goes between Canada and Finland today. This is a tight turnaround for Canada. They got in at 6 a.m. yesterday due to the weather, and they got to play a 1 o'clock game this afternoon. So fatigue is going to be a factor for them. And, a guy like Sidney Crosby, he's not getting any younger. He looked tired in that game against the United States. And I know he's playing through an injury right now. He didn't play the last several games for Pittsburgh leading up to the tournament. So it'll be interesting to see if Makar comes back in and how it all plays out. But I'm hoping it's Canada U.S. But it could be a situation where, man, if that game this afternoon goes to overtime, if Sweden were to beat a team, I'd say maybe an uninspired USA team, that could be the final on Thursday, Sweden USA. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out here today.
Do you think Swayman plays tonight for the U.S.?
I think it would probably be Jake Oettinger ahead of Swayman. Oettinger was backing up in the two games in Montreal, so just guessing, Ottinger's probably number 2 on the depth chart right now.
Let me ask you, from a national perspective, about Charlie McAvoy. We played that clip as we were introducing you, talking about his hit against McDavid the other night. There are people around here who look at the big ticket contract that he got a few years ago and say, oh, he's getting paid like one of the top defensemen in the league, but he's not Cale Makar. He's not that type of a player. How do you view him from an outsider's perspective?
I would agree with what you just said. I mean, he's not Cale Makar. He's not Quinn Hughes. He's not an offensive juggernaut like those guys. He does have offense, but the one thing that I think that Charlie McAvoy has over those other guys is what you saw the other night, and that nastiness that you can play with in a playoff series in a situation like that. If you go back and watch Connor McDavid, who was very good in that game, and he turned on the Jets and beat McAvoy, nobody was stopping McDavid on that first play when he got around McAvoy. That wasn't McAvoy's fault. I mean, Werenski could have helped him out a little bit. He didn't. I think Werenski didn't want to take a penalty by reaching in, and that's why he kind of give him a free lane. But nobody was stopping McDavid there. But if you watch the rest of that game, there were 2 hits that McAvoy laid on McDavid. And then after that, McDavid, every time he came down McAvoy's side, what did he do? He dished it. He didn't want to face it. So I'm telling you, when you play that way, it has an effect. It has an effect in game. It has an effect on a player like McDavid. I don't ever remember McDavid getting smoked like that in an NHL game, ever. And it happened twice in that game. Now, if you do that in a playoff series where you get a guy like that early on, and I'll bet you every time he comes down that side, he's got his head up and he's looking to move that puck because he does not want to get what he got from McAvoy in that game. 82 games, you're going to have games where McAvoy probably is not playing to that level of intensity. It's normal. It's impossible to play at that level. But in a playoff series, you get a defenseman like that on your side, it can go a long way to helping your team.
Brian, if they meet again Thursday, what do you think? How does it unfold in your mind?
Well, again, I will be a fan for that one. That'll be an ABC game, so I can sit there as a fan, and I will be cheering for the U.S. I think the U.S. Should feel good about the way that they initiated everything in that game as far as the physical play. I'm a little concerned if Matthew Tkachuk can or can't play. I think this team is totally different if they don't have Matthew Tkachuk in a game like that. No disrespect to Chris Kreider. He's a very nice player, but he certainly does not bring what Matthew Tkachuk brings. And you guys saw it firsthand. You talked about it, what he did in that playoff series against the Bruins. This guy is a special player. He's more than just an agitator, meathead guy that wants to, fight away. He doesn't do it very often, but he's got a tremendous hockey IQ. He can make plays under pressure as well as play that physical game that needs to be played. If he's not in the lineup, it is a concern. But I think in the end, the juice of being on home soil, I would think can propel him. And I listen, I think Canada is a little bit, Crosby's not 100%, and that is a concern for me. And I think their goaltending is a question mark. I thought Binnington in the 2 games that he played, I thought he gave up 2 questionable goals. It's been talked about going into this tournament that their goaltending might be the weakest of all 4 teams. And I think it may hurt them in the final, and the U.S. will be victorious.
All right. Well, Brian, congratulations. These ratings, who knew? I mean, this has captured people's attention. And both games on TNT, you got Canada, Finland, which certainly means something. That's going up at 1 o'clock this afternoon. Sweden against the U.S. at the Garden at 8. Brian Boucher, you'll be between the benches. Thank you so much for taking the time. We appreciate it. And I hope you got over your initial nerves of being on with Dan and Ryan.
It'll take me some time to calm down after this terrific hit, but yeah, it was great to be with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Maybe find someone in the lobby of the hotel to take a couple swings at, get the anxiety out of your system. All right, thank you, Brian. We appreciate it.
There you guys.
All right,
Bye.
There you go, Brian Boucher. If you like that clip, check out more videos from Toucher and Hardy here. For more Bruins analysis and opinion, hit this playlist.